Do you like the idea of buying a game and trying to play the game, and then for completely random reasons out of your control, you cannot play the game? Or perhaps you upgrade to a new, better CPU that is actually one that's rated extremely highly for gaming workloads, and you can't play your game. Well, that's actually what's happened to a bunch of people who are trying to play a bunch of games that have Denuvo as a part of them. Yes, Denuvo once again has cropped up in the news cycle, this time for two different reasons, which makes it a very interesting story. And speaking of those, smoothLTTstore.com like transition into the 11th of November is when we are properly unveiling our game studio, our game, The Pale Beyond, and our publisher. There'll be video on this channel and a bunch more. So, 11th of November, 3 p.m. UK time. Watch out for it. Just a few days. Okay, let's go, Matt. So, Denuvo. As for what's happening, well, there's been a bit of an outage. So over the weekend, people across the internet started to report not being able to launch a bunch of games. And people realized, oh shit, these are games with Denuvo attached. Now, this does include major things like Marvel's Guardians of the Galaxy, a new release game that's super highly regarded, also Football Manager 2022. So that's two, pretty new games. Also, this has impacted Shadow of the Tomb Raider, Wolfenstein Youngblood, Planet Zoo, Tony Hawk Pro Skater 1 and 2 Remastered, Mortal Kombat 11, Total War Warhammer, and Middle-earth Shadow of War. That's pretty rough. So for a period on Sunday, tough shit. You cannot play your game. Now, let's talk about how this has actually happened. So, it was initially unclear, but it turns out it was a lapsed domain name. A lapsed domain name attached to some DRM meant that people couldn't play Total War and Guardians of the Galaxy for a while on PC. And there is another thing that's happened with Denuvo as well. So, yeah, codefusion.technology, which is a domain that reportedly is used for Denuvo game activation servers, seemingly was not renewed when it expired at the end of September. There was, of course, a grace period, but then it was revoked, leaving the servers inaccessible, meaning that Denuvo basically couldn't phone home and verify whatever it needs to do, which meant that you just could not play those games. This is another great example of Denuvo not being particularly great for people who buy games, and I think while the explanation for all of this is reasonable, and we can all see how it happened, at the end of the day just impacted end users. So, very bad. So while all of this was happening, Denuvo actually was working and stuff, but they were completely, silent. They were not public. And this basically meant that individual developers and publishers had to scramble for communications and fixes on this. The Football Manager 2022 devs popped in their own Steam forums. Square Enix support reportedly confirmed that they were looking into issues with Guardians of the Galaxy as well. And that Guardians of the Galaxy thread is actually still very active. I mean, a lot of people wondering, why do we need this DRM? Why is this internet connection thing needed when I'm playing a single-player RPG, or action RPG, whatever, action game? What's going on? Now, they did respond whenever PC Gamer poked them, saying, a Denuvo domain was unreachable yesterday afternoon CET. The problem was fixed after we got notified from our automatic system control. After the fix, there was no whatsoever restriction or limitation on the game. Denuvo is working to implement further improvement to avoid such downtime in the future. So, bad for Denuvo, and it's yet another mark. It's yet another mark on them, and that's not even the final thing that's went wrong with Denuvo that we're going to talk about today.
Yeah, there's the Alder Lake issue, which we'll get into a little bit later on, but first of all, this is just insane. This is just the case of, here's a third party, right? Here's a third party who have nothing to do with the game themselves. They just, manage the DRM. They forgot to renew a domain, and now multiple different companies have major outages with all of their games, even new ones. It brings you back to the constant idea of, do we really need this? Is this harmful more than it is helpful? Especially from the consumer angle, and you look and go, well, this is clearly not working for anyone.
Yeah, for the average honest consumer, there is absolutely nothing to be gained and only things to lose. Now, you could say that there could be a second-order benefit to a regular user or player of games, because if enough piracy was stopped to have Denuvo be revenue positive for the developer, then the developer will do better, and then maybe more games can happen. So you can also make that argument, but Is that an overblown argument? And ultimately, does that matter whenever somebody just tries to log into a game in their highly valued time off at the weekend and they cannot do the thing they wanted to do?
Yeah, so if you think of this from like the outage in the technology services sector, you've got all of these companies looking at, wait, our games went down, we weren't notified, it's not in our servers, it's nothing to do with us, it's actually a third party, just, to put it lightly, they fucked up, and all of our games, or a substantial portion of our games, have been down for hours on a weekend. In a world where Ubisoft are looking at the daily average revenue per user, if that tanks for one day, they're going to see that, they're going to go, wait, what's going on? So I feel like all of these, everyone who's affected, especially for people who've got the, Guardians being a new game, all that engagement's really important, Valhalla, all of those games, I think they're going to send very stern emails over to Denuvo. And hopefully this is another step in them kind of reevaluating whether or not Denuvo is actually important or useful. Because this is honestly, like, from a big business perspective, this is pretty major.
Yeah, absolutely. And I suppose we go on to more things, like as an example, Denuvo has just been removed from Star Wars Jedi Fallen Order.
Yeah.
Now, it's that thing, they still do like to have Denuvo there to protect like the initial, like the launch Fortnite against cracking and piracy and stuff. But, there's another win. It has been removed. But that's actually not all for the Denuvo issues, because Alder Lake, which is the new generation of CPUs from Intel, which, by the way, it seems still a lot of heat, a lot of power consumption, that is, but also a lot of power and performance, especially for gaming, which could be an issue if you were to use one of these on a Denuvo game, because of a few interesting things. Now, these CPUs are a decent generational leap in performance, but there are some compatibility issues. Now, the Alder Lake CPUs have got two types of core. They have performance cores and efficiency cores. So that's the sort of architecture that you'll see. Apple Silicon, the iPhone chips, the Snapdragons that are on loads of the Android phones. Like, it's a pretty standard thing. It seems to be making its way over to the kind of like performance space now. So that's an interesting thing. It seems that this overall is a really, really great move from Intel, which, of course, Intel have been flagging behind AMD in a few key areas, so it's good to see more competition in that market. But the problem is that Denuvo is actually crashing whenever the CPU shifts Denuvo tasks from the performance core to the efficiency cores. Basically, it recognizes those cores as another system, and then ends up basically shitting itself, falling over, and no video games for you. Now, the fix to this does seem to be easy enough, and Denuvo have noted that they actually have it solved on their end, but the developers need to update their games. So this is another annoying thing. Like, imagine you're a dev, you've only got so much system engineer time. Well, now some of that time has got to go into implementing this fix. That's going to be quite annoying, really. So there you go. Yep, Denuvo already contacted each publisher of the affected game titles and provided patches for those titles to be compatible. So we, I suppose, just hope that Denuvo went to every length to make sure that the patches are very easy for the developers to implement. But still, not ideal. And hey, maybe not all of your users will know to update. Just issues like that, right? So
yeah,
they suck. And if you look at the affected games, it's quite a lot.
Mm-hmm.
Man, yeah, it really is quite a lot. And some of those are going to be sort of legacy titles. They're not going to be the latest title from some of these publishers. So that's going to mean getting your team and moving them back onto a thing that's been signed off. Look at Anthem. Not that there's a burning desire to play Anthem at the minute, but that's a kind of dead project now. So you're going to have to pull somebody off the new thing that you're doing in order to get support. It sucks for devs.
Yeah.
It also sucks for Denuvo as well, but
yeah,
that's what it is. Ultimately, the end user loses.
Yeah, of course, but it's the same thing as I was saying about this whole situation with Denuvo being down over the weekend. It's the case of for the actual developers, for the actual publishers, they're going to be sitting thinking, what's the point? So we're doing this, and now all of our legacy games will need an update, or some of our legacy games will need an update. And that's the case from their end, where it's like, we have to go and bother to do this now. Well, what's the point? Yeah. Can we start removing Denuvo 1 week after the game's out instead of, a year, or instead of 6 months? Because obviously we covered a decent while ago now that they basically pay for 1 year protection at a time.
Yeah.
And that's why you see it disappearing off, although you see it disappearing a lot sooner. Like one of those cases here is like Bravely Default 2. That being unplayable, I could very quickly see Square Enix going, because they've been removing Denuvo from everything else as they go, I could honestly expect them to go, well, what's the legal ramification of removing it mid-contract? Is that going to be damaging enough versus people on new CPUs not being able to play? And the PR hit that comes with, negative reviews on the game on Steam or something for, I can't play this in Alder Lake. Then you go, oh, well, shit, just get rid of it. Just get rid of it, and then that'll damage that reputation. But I think the more consumer side of things is just the idea of what happens when the publisher doesn't support a game? What happens when the publisher just, is defunct or something like that? What happens when we change how CPUs work again in a couple of years' time, and now old games literally aren't compatible because of the DRM? Obviously, you can write emulation layers for games and stuff like that, but the point is that to make these games playable without Denuvo and without the publisher, you need to get a crack. That's the way to solve this problem, is to crack Denuvo. Obviously, that's against terms of service or whatever else in cases like that, but it's just it's just brutal. It's brutal to see both of these problems, both two very different flavors of Denuvo, making issues for publishers, for developers, and for customers at the same time.
Yeah, so basically that sucks, but there's been good things happening. As you said, Square Enix, they are removing this stuff earlier and earlier, and hopefully we can get past this as an industry. So at the end of the day, customers get a better experience, which is what we all want. So there's that. Speaking of customers getting a better experience, we hope to earn customers and give them a great experience, and maybe you'll find out how in 2 days, 11th of November. It's our game reveal and everything, so check it out. It'll be on this channel. Thanks for watching. See you next time.